Hi, and welcome back to my reflections. Today I would like to speak about an interesting subject that I keep being asked about it, and it's polygamy in Islam. Now the amazing thing is that whenever the subject comes, usually or most of the time the question is being asked like this: what do you think, or what's your opinion, or what about the problem of polygamy? Well, guess what? I don't think polygamy was or is a problem. Polygamy is in fact a solution to a problem, and this problem is when women in a society would outnumber men, or in some societies where they need children. Of course, then maybe they need to procreate more. Maybe this was in the past, and this is not the case anymore. But in any way, if the case is that it's raining men, then hallelujah. Of course, it's not an issue, but it was not always like this, especially in the past, and this is because of multiple reasons. In some societies there's been a lot of wars, and especially in the past, only men would participate in wars, and this would leave a lot of women without husbands, which in especially primitive societies, it would mean also that they are with no care, protection, or less at least. Now the situation today is a bit different, but what's the opinion of Islam? Islam obviously didn't invent polygamy. It always existed, and I don't have record, and I don't know if someone really have record to when this practice has started in human history. But what Islam did is that it limited the number of wives that a husband can have. Now, of course, again, when I'm talking today about polygamy, I mean polygyny, which means that this is the case where men have multiple wives, and not polyandry, which is the other way around. Just to be clear, because Islam never approved or tolerated polyandry, nor it was, or we have any records of polyandry being practiced in Arabia prior to Islam. So the Islam, as we said, yes, it approved it. Again, another misconception is that sometimes today we think that Islam promoted. In fact, Islam never promoted polygamy. It doesn't promote it, and it's even on the other way around, make people notice that it's a big burden, and of course terms and conditions apply. And these terms and conditions to practice polygamy are quite difficult ones, because it requires a lot of time management, financial management. It means if you would like to practice polygamy, first of all you should be able to, and then you should treat all women equally. And of course, here again I remind that it's one or two or three, and then of course the maximum and the roof of it, of the possibilities, is four. A Muslim man cannot exceed this, and even this, the graduality in it is something which is mentioned in the Quranic text. I really think that it's been mentioned for a purpose, to mention that it's not just that you can afford it, you can have multiple wives, so just go for four. And these terms and conditions are not easy going ones. In fact, they are quite difficult, that Islam, or the Quranic text again, it questions the possibility of reaching or fulfilling completely these conditions. But then of course it may, because then otherwise it would contradict itself. It says what people should do is try their level best to reach the situation where they would treat all the wives equally. And here of course we're talking about great time management skills, and of course also financial management, because the treating them equally is a must, it's not an option. So again, if we look carefully into the Quranic text, we would see that it pictures the ideal situation for a man when he's married to one wife. because there is less pressure, and then of course also there is less possibilities of treating the wife unjust in a way that's unjust or unfair. But if there is any reasons, and there is actually different reasons, we'll talk about some of them now in a while, and this man needs to have a second wife, a third wife, a fourth wife, then it is allowed. But let's see, or let's watch closely the current situation. In fact, in most of the Muslim communities today, the majority of Muslims would be monogam. And in case of polygamy, the majority again would be polygams that have 2 wives. But to have 3 or 4 wives, this is kind of a rare situation in the Muslim communities today, or among the Muslim communities today. And this is of course something that we can understand, because in fact we have also another problem, and it's that we have a lot of Muslim men and women that are unmarried. And this is because of a lot of social questions. I mean, what part of it is that marriage, as anywhere in the world, would require also a lot of financial burdens. This would include not only what's known as the bride money, because of course in the Muslim tradition there is no dowry. The dowry is what's practiced in some areas where women would give money to men for marriage, while the bride money is the other way around. It's the man that pays this money, which is not a price. That's also another misconception, because it's not a price, but it is something that either, or it started by showing the appreciation from the part of the man of a lady. So he gifted her with this bride money, and in most of the cases it used to be optional. It's compulsory as a condition, but the amount of it would be optional, left to the man. So of course the more he would show his status in a society and his appraisal for the family of the wife and to the bride and the bride itself, this amount would be more. Now again, here I come back to it. This is now an obstacle. Of course also the post-marriage expenses, because especially in the past, people would live, at least the young men would still live with their young wives within the big family house. But now more and more they would start their life with a new house. So because of all this, there is a lot of men and women, as we mentioned, unmarried. And the priority from the Islamic point of view is actually first for these unmarried ones to be helped to get married. And then after this, if within the society there is a problem, then it has to be corrected in the way that, of course, if women would outnumber men, which is in most of the societies is the case, then polygamy would be a solution. Again, so here we see that it is introduced as a solution actually, and not a problem, unless, as we mentioned, the abuse of polygamy would appear. And sometimes, yes, it is. Sometimes people would marry, remarry, divorce, and it's just for sensual pleasure, or just to show that they have money and they can afford it. This is of course something which is bad, and it's not appreciated by Islam at all. But again, to see what women would think about it today, it's also interesting, because of course for the last 20-30 years the polygamy has been reduced. Before it was more current to have more polygamy in the society, but then women started to resist this. They started to want really their husbands for themselves, and not to accept, in a way, marrying someone who already have a wife, and on the other, from the other way around also, a wife would not accept to stay married to someone who would go for a second marriage, then she would ask for divorce. And of course this is her right. If she doesn't want to live with a man in this situation, she can ask for the divorce, which is again also, this brings us to the point where we mentioned that there is different reasons why polygamy would occur. One of them is that if the man cannot have children with this wife because she has a health problem, but then of course he is able to procreate, then he would marry a second wife because he doesn't want to divorce his first wife. The second thing, that maybe for a reason, a health reason, or else their sexual life is not satisfying him, or it's not working for him, or it's not happening anymore. Then, of course, then because Islam doesn't tolerate at all sex out of the institution of marriage, the only way for a man would be then to get a second wife and be a polygam. Now, for the ladies on the other way around, of course, they cannot practice polyandry, as we said, but then again, what they can do is that in the case of these reasons that we mentioned, the man cannot, their husband cannot procreate, or for a different reason they cannot live with them anymore, or they're badly treated, what they can do is that they can ask for divorce. That's what they can do, and then marry another man. This is, of course, a possibility for them. But they do not have the possibility of practicing polyandry and having a second husband or a third husband. And this is something that also is understandable because Islam has developed, like most of the monotheist religions, in a patriarchal society, and it's a patrilineage trace of descendants. So the children will be traced to their father, and the father to the grandfather, and so on and so on. That's why obviously polyandry would not work. But what's happening today? Today, with many, and again I'm talking about the Muslim communities, in many Muslim communities we have a lot of women that are not married. And these women, many of them are financially secured, maybe they have a job or they come from a family, they are highly educated, because this is also now education is well promoted by the different governments in the Arabian world and also the Islamic world, at least in the cities. Maybe in some parts of rural areas it's still not that widely promoted or practiced, but even though a minimum of education is almost now granted for a big part of the rural areas in many Muslim countries in the world. But again, the interesting phenomenon is that many women are now, or at least some women, are accepted now to take a polygam husband. And again, these women are not this category that we might imagine, or what we thought before would make them accept polygamy. Illiterate women, uneducated, or poor that need someone to support them. No, the other way around. Sometimes they're covered financially, and also education-wise, this is not the obstacle. But because they want to have a husband, they would not, or they want a specific husband, and they find these qualities in one that he's already married, then they might accept it. On the other way around also, for ladies, at least again some, maybe we find now, these days, that there is kind of a step back from what used to be the situation 20 or 30 years back, and there is less resistance from women married to the idea that their husbands would take another one. I wouldn't suggest that they would be happy about it, but many of them would not put that condition that no, if you want to marry another woman, then she asked for the divorce. Of course, some of them, they would still do this, That's obvious. But what I'm saying is that there is a kind of return toward accepting polygamy. I'm talking here more about the women's side, because for men, obviously, you can imagine it was not always a problem, even though that for the financial burden of it and the time management question, there is less men that are really willing to be polygamous. But again, the thing is that the ladies that would accept that their men would be polygam, I wouldn't say it's increasing once again after this step back 20-30 years ago, but also the women that would accept to take a man who's married, at least to another wife, and understand why he needs this is kind of increasing, at least in the Gulf region. And this is because the absence of polygamy created more serious issues and more serious problems in the communities, in these communities, which is, again, would be linked directly to what we mentioned before, that Islam doesn't tolerate any sexual relationships outside the institution of marriage. So I hope that with this I given some reflections on the subject, and maybe in the future, and especially if there is some comments or questions that would be sent, maybe we'll discuss this in some of the future videos. Thank you very much.